Hey y'all, welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bonnethead and I do horror analysis on the internet. Now I know y'all saw the title, so you kind of get the gist of what we're going to be talking about today. It is no mystery that here in the US, our birth rates have been on a very steady decline ever since 2007, I believe. And not only here in the US, but all across, oh my god. Hello, my princess. But yes, not only has this been happening here in the US, but it's been happening all across the West. Even in some places in the East, we are losing our population and we're losing our desire to have children. But something that none of these places can seem to figure out is why. Why is this happening? Now, there's a lot of different theories that people have come up with trying to figure out exactly what the reason is. People have talked about better access to and better education surrounding contraception. Another thing, particularly with more industrialized and developed countries, is the rise in feminism and the rise of women's ability to choose when they have kids, or even if they have kids at all. Obviously, it's a very good thing that women are able to choose when and if they have children if they so please, but it can also be a pretty major contributor to our declining birth rates. Another reason that I've seen people sort of mention but not talk about too much is that industrialization in a lot of more developed countries pretty much eliminates the need to have a lot of children. Back in a pre-industrialized era, it's a lot easier to excuse having lots and lots of children, not only because of religion, not only because of the lack of contraception, but also having more children gives you more workers, it gives you more people to support the family. Not to mention the survival rates of those children was much lower, so having more children, I guess, increased your chances of some of them living. Thankfully, we don't need to worry about that anymore, but that has also led people to have less children. The very last one that has become particularly relevant in today's day and age is this complete inability to even afford to be able to raise children. There are a lot more people that are a lot more concerned with this ability to properly and adequately provide for your child. And if many people don't even feel like they can adequately provide for themselves or maybe even their partner, how are you supposed to plan to have a child? Genuinely. And in saying that, the ability to have kids becomes less and less about a personal choice and more about whether or not you can, whether or not you are able to. And if you're looking at your ability to have children through this lens, the entire idea starts to become less and less charming really quickly. And so this idea of having kids and raising a family is starting to lose its social charm. A lot of people don't have this same idealistic idea of raising a family and having that sort of achievement that we've been told through various means of propaganda is so important to our lives. Because if you think about it, here in the US, how do we do things? It's supposed to be high school, college, job, marriage, house, kids, rinse and repeat. You can mix it up a little bit, but generally speaking, that's pretty much how you do it here. But nowadays, more and more people, myself included, see many of the achievements that I've just listed, or many of the milestones that I've just listed, as being unattainable and unrealistic, which makes the kids part of that whole thing, the very last step, not only feel even farther and even less attainable than the other items, but it also feels like this additional and unnecessary financial burden, another responsibility on top of everything else that you have to keep in line. And like I said, I completely understand these worries. Those of you who are watching, who are in this generation, I'm pretty sure know exactly what I mean when I say that it is very difficult to feel positively about the current state of things right now, especially as we become adults, especially as we are supposed to be hitting these milestones. Most of us are finishing high school. That hasn't changed. But as far as college goes, it is becoming more and more expensive by the year. So college is sort of losing its importance. It's losing its justifiability. It's harder and harder to justify going to college now. And as far as jobs go, oh, don't even get me started. The US is losing jobs rapidly. I mean by the thousands. And because of that, the job market has just become a nightmare to try and navigate. If you've applied for jobs in the past couple of months, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're applying to 180 jobs, you're getting 6 responses, you're getting 3 interviews, only to be told that as a fresh-faced Gen Z candidate, you don't have enough experience for that entry-level position. As far as marriage goes, we as a society have become ridiculously antisocial, which means less dating and even less marriage. Now, the housing market. Oh my god. Looking at the housing market genuinely just makes me want to break the temples off of my blue light glasses and gouge them into my eyeballs. But like, even buying a house is more difficult, and it's not ideal to be raising kids if you're renting in most people's situations. Most people, before they have kids, ideally they want to buy a house first. On top of all of what I just listed, the class divide just seems to be growing by the second, while billionaires are literally holding us upside down and shaking all of the pennies out of our pockets. Basic necessities only seem to be rocketing to prices that they are never coming down from. So with all of that being said, how on earth is this generation supposed to feel motivated to have children? Where is the charm in it anymore? Where is the support? Where is the help? You look at the state of the world, and even interpersonally, you're kind of like, how am I supposed to feel good about bringing a child into this world? I've had that thought. How am I supposed to even support this child? Never mind help it navigate how the world is right now. And I know I'm rambling. I know this intro has been longer than I normally make them, and it's because I have a theory. And that theory is that it is not just that Americans don't want to have kids anymore. It's the entire American idealistic facade that has been propagandized to us since the 50s. That facade now has a level of aversion attached to it. People don't want to live it out anymore. People are seeing the cracks in the foundation. People are viewing the entire facade as being a sort of trap, rather than a personal choice that would make them happy, largely due to the political and economic state of the country at the moment. And thinking about all of this really made me actually want to revisit a film that I haven't thought about in quite some time. That film being the 2019 Lorcan Finnegan film, Vivarium. So without any further ranting about the current state of things, let's get into my interpretation of this film and why I believe it puts on display the social and psychological worries that people have about having children, about following this very same structure that we've used for decades. For those of you who don't know, or maybe need a refresher, the film follows a young couple, Gemma, who's an elementary teacher, and Tom, who is a landscaper. They're looking to buy their very first home where they can start to begin the next chapter of their lives together. However, in their search, they come across a new suburban development called Yonder. But when they decide to take a tour of these homes, they quickly realize that the neighborhood that they entered does not have an exit point. They can't escape. They got into the neighborhood, they can't get out. Now let's learn more about this neighborhood Yonder. It is an extremely uncanny, idealistic facade that mimics the perfect suburban neighborhood for young families, as the company's very strange and off-putting real estate agent lets us know. His name is Martin. And when I say uncanny, I mean ridiculously uncanny. The set design is really, really well done. Every home looks identical. They look exactly the same. The lawns are so well manicured, it makes me want to vomit. The homes are perfectly manicured. Everything looks brand new. Everything looks squeaky clean. There's not a crack in the road. And these homes, they seemingly go on forever and ever and ever. Think the back rooms meets that neighborhood Anvil from the live action Cat in the Hat movie. It's so freaky. And I think what makes it just that extra bit freaky is I feel like I've seen these kinds of neighborhoods before. Any new suburban development looks like that. But anyways, let's get into the message analysis. This film is very heavily exploring the horrors of suburbia, the horrors of societal expectations, and how both of these things lead to the death of relationships, the death of yourself, the death of anything that is important or real to you. Now, I say this because this couple has been house hunting for a while. They haven't found the right place, nothing really seems to fit. So despite Yonder not really being what they're looking for, they decide to take a look anyways. They're kind of desperate at this point. They're also intrigued by Martin's claims of affordability and that the new development is super diverse. He's really playing up the ideal nature of these homes in a rapidly booming housing market, which sort of rushes the couple into trying to make a decision on a home quick before things become extremely expensive and completely unaffordable. Martin also seems to understand the couple's resistance to suburbia, but he wants them to give it a chance. So we're kind of seeing this couple who doesn't really want to live out that suburban lifestyle be pushed slowly but surely into that very same lifestyle, kind of using a form of social conditioning in place of a true desire to actually live that way and to hit all of those milestones back to back to back in the perfect American idealistic way. Now, I'm mentioning America a lot here, although I do understand that the film does take place in Britain, I believe, and the director is Irish, I'm pretty sure, but I'm only speaking in these terms because I myself am American and that is my interpretation of the film, so that'll be the place that I'm coming from. Now, once this couple is in this neighborhood Yonder and they're touring house number 9, which by the way is the only house that seems to be numbered, Martin, the real estate agent, sneaks out and leaves while the couple is distracted looking at the backyard, which leaves them to try to escape the neighborhood by themselves, only to find that the neighborhood is seemingly never ending and every single road seems to lead back to house number 9. They don't know where they're going. Everything looks the same. There's no road signs. There's no way for them to know exactly where they are. There's no internet signal. There's no gas stations. There's no local stores or markets or anything like that. And there's no other people. Nobody else lives in this neighborhood. So very quickly they figure out that they are completely alone and they're trapped. So eventually they run out of gas and they try to escape on foot, only to find that it is the very same loop that they were doing while they were in their car. At a certain point, they get desperate enough that they try to burn this house down, only to collapse collapse from exhaustion and wake up to find the house completely untouched the next day. So this couple ends up being forced to live in house number 9. Now, when the couple wakes up to find that the house had not been burned down and that it looked completely perfect, they also find that they have received a package with a newborn baby inside. On the box, the couple is instructed to raise the child in order to be released, meaning that they have to parent this child until it is fully grown before they are able to leave. The one thing being that this child is not normal and actually exemplifies all of the arguably worst parts about children. It grows unimaginably fast. It's loud, repetitive, and annoying. It mimics the things that you do or say as an adult, and anytime it needs something or wants something, it just starts screaming. It won't tell you what it wants. Oh no, that would be way too easy. But even as it grows older, like a baby, it will just scream until you figure out what it wants. And once you figure that out, it'll stop screaming. So it's a nightmare to try and deal with. Again, this child thing exemplifies all of the worst parts about raising children, the worst parts about children in general. Or maybe I should say the most difficult points of raising a child. So before this couple can even turn around, they have become suburban homeowners and parents, completely trapped in a situation that they are unable to escape. Which actually leads me into wanting to discuss the title of the movie, Vivarium, which before watching this movie, I had no idea what that actually meant. I don't think a lot of people do. So I'm going to read you the dictionary definition of it. A vivarium is an enclosed, controlled environment, often with a glass front, designed for keeping and raising live animals or plants under conditions simulating their natural habitat for observation, research, or as pets. The most interesting descriptor here, I think, is simulating their natural habitat. So we see that this couple has been put into an environment that they are unable to escape that mimics their natural habitat. The natural habitat being suburbia, where they're supposed to be, how the next step of their lives is supposed to look. I thought that was a really, really interesting word choice for the title, given what the film is about and the message that it's trying to portray. Anyways, after about 100 days of raising this child together, Tom notices that the ground is made up of something that isn't earth. It's not dirt, it's not soil, it's not anything like that. It's some sort of foamy substance. So he begins to dig at the ground because he believes that it has to lead somewhere. Now, this moment in the movie is the beginning of the end of the romantic relationship between Gemma and Tom. Not only their romantic relationship, but their emotional connection. And I actually believe that this is probably the most well done part of the movie, is the straining between the couple's relationship in this entire scenario. So like I said, Tom starts digging this hole, and it very quickly becomes an obsession for him. His obsession is motivated by this initial idea that he is making progress toward escaping, thinking that he is doing something for him and Gemma. Although it becomes abundantly clear very, very quickly that this is just a mental and actually pretty physical escape from this neighborhood. Not only from the neighborhood, but also from this child thing and inadvertently from Gemma as well. And in his desire for escape, he ends up seemingly completely forgetting why he's even doing this in the first place, which leaves Gemma to raise this child thing completely by herself. Now, this is obviously an analogy for the ways in which men escape their home lives by distracting themselves with work, with this initial goal of providing for their families or providing for their partner or being the man, right? Which is a seemingly pure intention, but it does end up becoming an escape from this life that they no longer feel charmed by. And because in this instance, Tom's work is the digging of the hole, the couple slowly begins to lose their connection from one another, and it is really sad to see. The distance between them widens as more and more of Tom's time is being taken up with the digging. Tom begins to ignore Gemma and her attempts at rekindling their relationship. She tries to joke with him, he doesn't laugh. She attempts intimacy with him and he rejects her. She even tries to ask him about his digging and he ignores the question. Initially, she wanted to help him dig the hole and he just didn't want the help. It seemed like he wanted complete and total isolation instead of having Gemma there to lean on. And there's even a point where they do end up reconnecting and having a good time by dancing in front of their car, but this child ruins it. It tries to join in and mimic whatever they're doing, and it unintentionally injures Tom, which makes Tom mad, and he gives up on the whole thing and storms off. So with their distance growing wider and wider, Gemma feels completely and totally alone. She doesn't have anybody else in this entire neighborhood to lean on. So she ends up being forced to connect to and care for this child by herself, and Tom sort of resents this new connection that Gemma has formed with this child. Despite Gemma's very clear hatred of the child still, she continuously reminds it that she is not his mother. But anyway, anyways, Tom at one point tries to kill this child, but Gemma ends up saving the child from Tom's hand, which strains their relationship even more because Tom views it as her picking sides, whereas she's viewing it as the only route to escape, as well as the only task that she has in this entire universe. So to get rid of it would be getting rid of the only thing that she has to do. And it would also be theoretically breaking the rules, and they wouldn't be able to escape, or they would end up being killed. And what's important to remember here is that Tom has the ability now to escape this entire situation and ignore it, whereas Gemma is forced to face the situation because she is the theoretical mother of this child that is doing all of the raising while Tom is out there digging and not doing anything. We see this kind of contrast in the fact that the child never once calls Tom father. It only calls Gemma mother. It's an important little detail that just puts on display who is truly doing the raising. Not only in this situation, but in many situations in real life that are very similar, where you have the stay-at-home mother and the provider father. So with Gemma and Tom separating more and more emotionally, and Gemma being trapped in the house with this child all day, Gemma now begins to remind Tom of their situation. She reminds him of the child. So again, she then becomes a reminder of this trap that they're in. Even though it is not her fault, she is also trapped. This only makes Tom resent and want to avoid Gemma even more, even though she is the only person that he has. And the separation, this growing distance between them, only serves to make them feel as though they are trapped with one another, rather than being a strong relationship that they can come together and be strong together in and lean on each other through a horrifying scenario. We often see how the horrendous work culture that we have in the US does lead to a lot of relationships ending, particularly in this family dynamic. A couple will no longer have that strength in their romantic and emotional connection because one or both of them are working too much in an effort to provide for the household. With that physical separation does come a mental separation, which means that you are no longer a team and you are instead trapped in this situation together. You're trapped in a house, you're trapped with kids. So Tom ends up getting sick from the constant stress being put on his body from digging. This illness actually ends up killing him, only for his dead body to be buried in the very same hole that he spent all that time digging, which happens to be above previous victims as well, who assumingly did the exact same thing that they have been doing, which means that not only did Tom work himself to death or work himself into an early grave, but also that he dug his own grave, not only in the literal sense, but also by ruining the one real and fulfilling thing that he had in his life, which was his relationship with Gemma. He ignored it for the remainder of his life, and it ended up getting him killed. In this analogy, the man's obsession with work isolates him and doesn't do him any justice. He's not working toward anything real. He's only working to work. He's only working to distract himself. He's only working to escape. And that escape only leads to his death. I thought it was such a well done analogy and a very moving one at that. Now, Tom's death is very obviously intentional. And what I mean when I say that is that anytime there's any sort of destruction that happens around the neighborhood, like the house being caught on fire and everything like that, it gets fixed. It gets repaired. Everything ends up looking exactly the same. Everything except for the hole that Tom digs. It's the only thing that does not get fixed and does not get repaired, which means that this universe and the things running it are allowing Tom to dig this hole, because these things, whatever they are, know exactly what he's doing. Now, Tom dies in Jenna's arms, which is a really emotional moment. It is the very first time that they are close since Tom started digging, both physically and emotionally, and it is the last time that they are close before he dies. And all that he has to reminisce on are the early days in their relationship before they were trapped in this situation, before they were trapped in yonder. There are no memories from being in yonder for them to reminisce on, only ones from before they were trapped, only ones from when they were free. Those are the happiest memories that they have together. And there are really no memories after that because Tom spent his entire time digging or working. This fragmenting of their relationship, like I said, I think it is the most well done part of the film. I think it is so accurately depicted, and it's such a good representation of how fast those dynamics can sort of sneak up on people and how that time goes so fast once it starts, and also how intense that regret can feel once it's all done and over with. Very, very emotional part of the the movie. Now, somewhere in the midst of all of this child becomes an adult. And before Tom dies, he refuses to help him in his ailment. And he actually ends up suggesting that it is Tom's time to be released. This is when we find out that being released means death, and that death is the only way out of this neighborhood. And I believe that this is meant to be representative of the often unrewarding aspects of being a parent, meaning you may raise these children and grow old only for your child or children to not want to care for you in your old age. In a similar fashion, this child that Gemma and Tom are raising, or I guess Gemma is raising, is very cold toward Tom and ends up being very cold toward Gemma as well. And because of this, Gemma regrets not allowing Tom to kill him when he was younger, because now he's too big to overpower. And somewhere along the way, we find out that this child is not human at all and is some sort of creature posing as a human so that it can be raised and nurtured by real humans. Gemma learns this after asking the child to imitate his teacher at school, and he starts making this terrifying noise, and his lymph nodes are swollen, and it's something that a human cannot do. His teacher at school is obviously just another one of him that is training him for when he eventually takes over as another real estate agent that is meant to lure in more parents. So now with this whole new plot line in place, knowing that this child is not a human child, we're reminded of the film opening with a cuckoo being raised in the nest of a bird that is not a cuckoo. Now, cuckoos are actually birds that are often referred to as brood parasites because they will actually swap their eggs into the nest of other birds in order to evade parenting duties. Once the cuckoo egg hatches, it will actually start shoving other birds and other eggs out of the nest so that it is the only one that the parent or the mother bird can pay attention to. It is the only one receiving the resources from the mother bird. Similar to how this child was sort of forced upon this couple and abuses their resources. To put it simply, this child is meant to be a cuckoo or a brood parasite. Now, I'm not positive about my interpretation of this, but I'm going to share it anyways. If you have a different interpretation, make sure you let me know in the comments because I'd love to see how other people think about this movie. But I believe that these monsters or brood parasites of the film are actually meant to represent the government in a weird way, because the government has convinced us via propaganda that moving to the suburbs and having children is the ideal. Not only is it the ideal, but it should be the goal. It should be what you dedicate your life to achieving. Now, these ideals or these goals greatly benefit the government because it creates a population that idealizes having children and growing the population. So creating an idealized world in which buying a family-sized home and having children is the goal is also ideal for the government so that you can create more workers, so that you can create more citizens. So they are effectively the cuckoo leaving their eggs in your nest, if that is not a personal goal of yours, or even if it is a personal goal for you, but it is not a organically produced goal, meaning that it may not ordinarily be something that you would want if it wasn't told to you. No, you do want this. You do want the suburban lifestyle. You do want kids. All of this kind of stuff that is very heavily marketed, especially toward women, so that women want to have kids and blah, blah, blah. So in this way, I believe that the film's monsters are actually fairly representative of these societal pressures to have and raise children despite the lack of personal desire or government support or even emotional reward in doing so. And I don't believe the movie's argument is that all children are like this. I believe it's actually saying that this concept, when forced upon citizens who don't want it, creates a nightmare scenario for them. There are many people who may want to have kids, but that is not the route that they want to take in doing that. Or there are many people who just may not want to have kids at all, but they feel like that's what they're supposed to do. And so they end up in these situations that are miserable and where they feel trapped. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I kind of just feel like I've been rambling. Anyways. The film ends with Gemma getting a glimpse of how many other couples these monsters have done this to. How many others of them are in the same situation, how many wives or girlfriends are left feeling completely alone at the dinner table or the breakfast table or anything like that. How many husbands leave to go to work and escape, and how unhappy everybody is when they're fallen into this trap. Meaning that this entire scenario is a facade. And we're really looking at the darker emotional and unrewarding side of parenting. And as Gemma is dying, we see this child, as he's zipping her up in a body bag, tell Gemma that she is a mother and that a mother prepares her son for the world and a mother dies, suggesting that Gemma is nothing more than a mother, which is another issue that we've talked about in my Stepford Wives video, and also indicates that being a mother is an all-encompassing and completely unrewarding prospect that is expected of all women, even if they don't want to become a mother. It is thankless, but it is your entire life. And Gemma's second to last words. Her last words were, "I am not your mother." But she says, "All I wanted was a home." And I think that this phrase is extremely powerful, especially in today's day and age, where many of those younger generations, like myself, aspire to have a home that they can call their own, one that feels safe, one that feels like them, one that feels comfortable, one that feels fulfilling. A lot of people, a lot of younger generations just don't feel that that home, that physical home, is within reach, both financially and emotionally. And I want to mention here that Gemma is not very old when she passes away. Her and Tom are not in this universe for very long at all. Like I said, this child grows extremely fast. Tom passes away pretty quickly, and Gemma follows not too long after that. From the time they get to the neighborhood to the time they die, I am not convinced that they were there for more than 2 years maybe, and they seem to be in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, maybe. And how fast all of this happens, to me, feels very representative of how fast that part of your life goes once it starts. As the mother, you're constantly moving around, you're constantly exhausted, you constantly have something to do. As the father, you're constantly working, every single day is the same. And then when you look back on life, you realize how fast it all went and how quickly you lose all of those years for yourself. I think it was really, really smart for the movie to play it that way and play with time. Oh boy, final analysis, right? I believe that this film puts on display all of the ugly and constricting and relationship ruining aspects of the traditional family route that we have been told in the United States is the ideal. It can often feel like a trap that is impossible to escape for many. It's often what breaks people down and leads people to not feel so charmed by this life. And I believe that many fear that this situation will happen to them if they fall into the trap, and they will lose these precious years of their lives to a structure that they don't see for themselves, to a structure that only serves to benefit the government, to a structure that is no longer feasible in today's day and age. That's what I really want to drive home today. The government still wants this to be the ideal in many people's heads, and yet they refuse to offer real support to parents in doing so. It's like I said, the house market is ridiculous. The job market is ridiculous. College is ridiculous. All of these things feel so out of reach. They cost so much money and they are so unattainable. And because of that, there is no motivation to have children right now. When people already feel so financially strained, when people already feel as though the future looks bleak. So the charm of raising a family and these propagandistic ideals that the government has been pushing since the 50s are so dated. They're no longer applicable to the average young person. This life is no longer charming. It feels like a fantasy world and it feels like a mockery. And I think that that is a large reason why people no longer want to have kids, is because the entire idea feels so stressful. It feels so ridiculously out of reach, and it feels like an emotional trap that only fits to serve the government, that only fits to serve those who are not us. You cannot expect younger generations to want to have kids with the state that things are in right now. A state in which parents are alone, in which financially they're struggling, in which the education system is failing, a state in which drives families apart and pulls couples apart and takes precious years off of your life. So the government wants us to have kids. You're going to have to do better than what you're doing right now. The charm is gone and we need a new motivation. I really hope this video made a little bit of sense, but I really felt like talking about this today. I watched this movie for the third time and it was actually really moving on the third time. I found myself relating to it a lot more than I initially had when I watched it back in high school. And I think that's because I have a new appreciation and understanding of the characters. Things are difficult right now. Things are very, very difficult right now. But you know what? I believe in us. I believe that every last one of us can get through it. What's on the other side? I have no idea. Maybe it'll be a completely different family structure that will look a lot better. Maybe it'll look worse. I have no idea. All I know is something has to change. But anyways, yeah, if you like this video, then make sure you leave a like or even consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And make sure you go and head over to the Jinx Podcast. Give that channel some love. We talk about tons of movies over there with very interesting conversations in a much more casual setting. So if you like this kind of content, you'll probably like what's over there too. Anyways, I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day and I can't wait to hear what you had to say. Anyways, see y'all. Bye.